Hey, what's up everybody? Ethan Nader here with Blade RC, and welcome to the first video of the Fusion 180 Smart Repair Series. So in this video, we're going to keep it short and sweet. We're just going to be replacing the main gear. I'm also going to show you how to loosen up the tail in order to slide the tail belt off of the pulley in order to access the main gear to remove it from the frame. So it's typically like bigger helicopters where you don't really have to remove the blades or anything up top on the main head. Basically just going to be popping off a couple ball links off the swash plate, removing a screw down on the main gear in order to pull it out and slide the main shaft out. So yeah, let's go ahead and get on into it. The screws that we're going to be removing throughout this video are going to be requiring a 1.5mm hex driver and then also a Phillips head screwdriver. So just make sure you have those on hand. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do to remove the main gear is we are going to want to loosen up the tension on the tail belt so then we can slide the belt up and over the pulley in order to access the main gear and remove it from the frame. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is come back to the very end, and we are going to want to pop the ball link off of the tail control rod going onto the tail pitch slider just like so. Now that the tail control rod is moving free from the slider, we can go ahead and take our Phillips head and we can loosen up these two screws right here and right here in order to slide the tail servo back. Make sure that you don't slide the tail servo too far back because it is still plugged into the flight controller and you don't want to put any stress on these wires. Just enough so then we can push the tail in to loosen up the tension on the belt. The next screw that we're going to want to loosen is this one right here. This is what is clamping down the tail boom case, holding the tail boom in place. So once we loosen that up, we will be able to push in the tail boom to loosen up the tension on the belt. Now with the tail boom pushed in, we now have enough room to get the belt out from under the pulley like so. So just make sure that it's pushed in just enough so then the belt can slide up and around the pulley. So it's a little bit hard to see on camera, but the next screw that we're going to be unscrewing is located right here under the main gear. It's actually part of the main gear, the actual plastic piece. It's just a screw going through the main gear piece and going through the main shaft holding the main gear in place. If you have a pair of needle nose pliers, it really helps in grabbing the screw, pulling it out from the main gear and making sure that it does not drop and get lost. So now that the main gear is essentially disconnected from the main shaft, we can theoretically pull the main shaft out from under the main gear. Now what we'll want to do first is we will want to pop off all three of these ball links just so then the swash plate can slide out with the entire head and main shaft. Now that the swash plate is disconnected from the ball links, you can go ahead and pull the main shaft and head assembly out from under the helicopter, like so. Alright, so as you can see, the entire main shaft and head is removed from the helicopter. So what we can do is we can take our little 1.5 hex driver or any other driver, move the tail belt out from over the pulley like so. And now we can remove our main gear. As you can see, this one is pretty chewed up. This is a common breaking point on the helicopter just so it doesn't put any stress on the motor. It's a lot better to strip out some plastic teeth than mess up a more expensive motor. All right, so now it's time to unpackage our brand new main gear and front belt pulley. All right, so with the new main gear and front belt pulley unpackaged, the first thing that you're gonna wanna do is take the three shorter screws that are included in the package and tighten them down into the top of the front belt pulley. You wanna make sure that the holes are lined up and all three screws thread in correctly. Okay, so now that the 3 screws are into the front belt pulley, it's time to reinstall the main gear into the Fusion 180 Smart. You want to make sure that your tail belt did not get twisted in the process of removing the old main gear, so just ensure that your belt is not twisted and your tail is going to be spinning the right way once you install this main gear. Now that the main gear and front pulley are in place, it's time to reinstall the main head and main shaft. Now you can use the screw that was with the old main gear. They also included another replacement screw in the included packaging for the main gear and front belt pulley. It's up to you. I'm just going to reuse the old screw that we used previously. Once you've gotten to this point, you might have to push the main gear up against the pinion in order to fit the main shaft into the hole through the lower bearing block and also the main gear. So just make sure that that slides in there like so. Now you can go ahead and reconnect these ball links. So the last thing really to do to connect the main gear into the main shaft is to re-screw in that longer screw that we had connecting the main gear to the main shaft. Spin the main shaft around until you see the holes line up and you can see clearly through the other side. Once you can see the other side through the main gear and the main shaft, you can go ahead and take that longer screw that you used earlier and thread it through until it's tight. All right, we now have our new main gear on the Fusion 180 Smart. You might have to readjust the gear mesh. I didn't have to. It's currently going in essentially the same exact spot. If you do though, you can just remove these 2 screws right here as well as these 2 right here. You don't really have to remove them. All you have to do is loosen them and you can move the motor back and forth and obtain the gear mesh that is required. Like I said though, the gear mesh on here is pretty close. You basically want the teeth of the main gear and the teeth of the pinion to have very little play. As you can see here, there's just a little bit of back and forth play. That's pretty much where I want it, so we're good to go there. Basically the next thing to do is we're gonna adjust the tension again on the belt and get the servo back in the correct spot. Now I am aware that the tail boom that I'm using is very messed up and I'm going to be changing that in a different video, but just for the sake of this video I'm going to be leaving the old broken tail boom on. But essentially whenever you give tension on the tail boom by pulling the tail boom, you want to make sure that the tail fin is level up and down with the frame. You want to make sure it's not too bent to one side like this or like that. Basically just want it as straight as possible. Now it's hard to tell in the video, but I have applied tension on the belt and I'm pulling back on the boom, holding it in place with my hands, all while I tighten the screw on the tail boom case like so. Make sure that that is tightened down and the case is clamping onto the boom so that it is not going anywhere. And as you can see, we now have good tension on the tail belt. All right, so the final couple of steps are going to be to reconnect the tail control rod to the bell crank through that ball link that you popped off at the beginning of this video. So just re-pop in the ball link like so. Now you're gonna wanna make sure on the bell crank or the tail pitch slider that it is basically as close to parallel with the boom as you can get it, like so, all while the servo is close to 90 degrees. Essentially the control arm is going to be perpendicular to the case like so. Once you have ensured this, you can go ahead and tighten down the 2 Phillips head screws onto the servo case. And with the tail servo tightened down, the main gear and front belt pulley replacement on the Fusion 180 Smart is complete. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and stay tuned for more repair videos coming on the Fusion 180 Smart. Happy flying, guys.